Fire HD8 that was working just fine until I took it to the bathroom with me and started reading and put it on a counter, and it dropped on the floor and it broke the glass. And this is what's left over on my adventure of trying to change the glass. It didn't work. And it's not worth putting any more time or any money into. So this is a battery.
Wow.
And we'll look a little more at this stuff
You
later.
remember what the original cost was on that?
I think I paid $69 for it when I first got it, or a little more, but not much more. But I got a lot of good use out of it, and so, how are we doing? Where are we on?
We're on.
All right. So, why don't we start the session, okay? My name is Bruce Turner. We're doing this for fun today because we like to have fun with computers, and that's why we're here. And all I'm asking of you is that if I get way off base, start talking a language you don't understand at all, you can kind of raise your hand a little bit and I'll kind of slow down. But I can't accommodate everybody, but I'm going to try to gear this toward the newer user today. Planning on having multiple sessions. If this goes well, we'll take little baby steps and work our way up to Cray supercomputers and the moonshot taking off and going to Mars. Today we're going to start with how do we turn on a laptop and how do we turn on a phone. So that's probably a good place to begin. So our first class is beginning Android, okay? And so the first question I got today was, what operating system does this computer run? And it says right on top here, Android. You know, so if someone understood the language of what this really means out top, they would have known that. But people don't know that. So that's why we're starting in the beginning. Going to help people get comfortable with the technology, how you can use your technology to learn and move forward. And everybody's going to have a different comfort level. Everybody's going to have a different way they want to learn. Some people don't want to learn. Some people just want to turn it on and maybe get their email and go to a website, and that's all. But I'm sure that the people who went up in the first orbitals around the Earth would have loved to have a computer this strong, I mean this powerful. This is so much more powerful than what they were using back then. But they didn't have that advantage, and they had to take different approaches. But we're going to kind of take a look at what technology we have. So just out of curiosity, when was the first orbital around the Earth, and when was the moonshot? What decade are we talking about?
60s.
Yeah, the 60s, 1960s. So here we are almost, 60 years later almost. I mean, it's
July 20, 1969.
yeah, so it's been a while, and so computers have come a long way from just basically crunching numbers and doing math and things like that. I mean, think about it. What were computers used for in the beginning? They were used so when you didn't have to do all that tedious math when you wanted to aim at that ship out in the middle of the strait and you wanted your missile to actually hit that ship. And it was so much easier for a computer to do the calculations than for people to do those calculations. So that was the original purpose. And education-wise, that will be for the internet class, which we're not going to get into today. There's just so much that we can do. But what we're going to start with today is we're going to start with the same problem that I had when I first got my Android phone. When I came from Apple to Android, guess what I couldn't figure out how to do? I could turn it on, but I couldn't answer a phone call. Because when you have an Apple phone, how do you answer a phone call? You press on the call. You press on the little green button. Well, you can press from today till next week on that little green button, and it won't answer your call. So you have to put your finger on it and you have to slide it. Well, if you don't know that, you can't answer your phone. So I'm going to assume that you're like me and we really know nothing about these devices.
Thank you.
And the bottom line is that even I only know a fraction of what you can do with these. But part of a whole is better than none of a whole. So we're going to start in the beginning and work our way up the ladder a little bit at a time. Yes, sir.
One thing that I noticed, I had an S6 before, this
Right.
was an SP, and I had put on a screen protector,
Uh-huh.
and I could never seem to get to make the feel be right to
Mm-hmm.
answer a phone, or it took me months to be able to answer a phone because
Right.
it seemed to work. But the new phone, I didn't put a screen protector on. Boy, it works slick.
Well, this one has a screen protector. I can still answer a call.
Well, I finally got to be able to do it, but the screen protector seemed to change.
It changes the sensitivity, especially if you don't put the right one on for your device. Because it has to be a conductive screen, and you have to be able to see, your body is like a battery, okay? I mean, so is yours and yours and yours and yours. And everybody's body is like a battery. So there's a charge that comes out of your fingertips, okay? And when you put it onto a touch screen and you move it, that charge actually interacts with the electronics of the device itself, and that's why you can move things around and press things and do gestures and things like that. So our battery is able to connect to this battery. I tend to think of this as being my silicone kid, and if you have biological children, they're your carbon kids, okay? So, you know, and if you look at the periodical scale of elements, you'll notice that both carbon and silicon are in line with each other, so they have very similar capabilities. But anyway, that's getting way beyond what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to stop right there. So we're talking about my silicon babies right here, and we're going to continue to talk about them because these are like my kids, okay? And we're going to kind of do a little care and feeding of Android devices today. Next week we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to focus more on the Apple side. We're going to look at iPhones and iPads. Today we're going to look at Android phones and Android tablets, which are essentially the same, except this one can make a phone call and this one can't. It can, but it can't do it the same way this one does. Okay. So we're going to go there. But first we're going to talk a couple minutes about learning, because the computer is a wonderful learning tool. I mean, you've talked about the Khan Academy, is that what you?
Yeah, right.
You know, I mean, there's all these sites online, and then there's Google, and then there's YouTube, and all those places like that. Somewhere out there in the ether, today we call that ether the cloud, okay? It's basically a computer sitting somewhere not here that you're getting your information from. So that's the cloud, the basic definition of the cloud. There's a computer out there that you can connect to over the internet that's not here, but it's acting just like it's on your computer. I'm also going to make another statement which may upset a few people, because I consider this to be a personal computer. So it fits right into the SPCUG PC users group. It's a personal computer. It's a smartphone. A smartphone is a phone that has a computer built into it, and it's a personal computer. So it fits right into the SPCUG PC user group, because these are computers. In the olden days, when we were just kids, this was the computer. This was the personal computer, because it had an IBM chip in it that we were able to connect to do calculating and things like that with it. So we called that a PC, as opposed to a Apple Macintosh or one of the other earlier models, or a Unix computer, or a mainframe. Those were other big computers out there used by industry. But this is as much a personal computer these days as this is. It's a heck of a lot more portable. Okay? And it works really well, especially when you learn how to use it to work for you. But we're going to talk a couple minutes, if this comes back up, there we go, about the evolution of learning using computers and devices and things like that. So of course, if you believe in the evolutionary model, we started out here and we worked our way up to here. Now we're working our way back down, okay? So anyway, we're basically, are we really moving ahead? Well, we're moving in a direction, okay? Whether it's good or bad, we'll talk about that in 1,000 years from now. We don't really know yet. But anyway, has anybody ever heard of B.F. Skinner? Yeah, he was a behavioral psychologist, okay? And he was one of the, we'll call it one of the greats, one of the icons of behavioral psychology. So, let's see if I can get my mouse over here. So he invented this thing here called the teaching machine. That looks awfully similar to the old covers on a disk drive, doesn't it? Like a floppy disk. But these actually had little wheels in them that you can turn around and come up with information and things like this. So this was one of the, from a social sense, this was one of the first computers used for learning. We're not really trying to bomb ships in the middle of the strait. We want to find out information. We want to be able to use our computer for fun things. Some people like to use their computers for prurient reasons. Some people like to use their computers for college courses. There's all sorts of ways you can use a computer. But this is kind of where they started for us, and this is where they started for me. Although I never used the Skinner teaching machine, my parents did buy one of these when I was a kid. And they didn't buy it for me. They bought it for my sister, who was having problems learning in school. Well, the reason she was having problems learning in school was because she wasn't motivated and she didn't want to learn. But I was like a sponge, so since they had this in the house, I learned how to use it. It had these little papers that actually went into this compartment and you'd roll them through. And when I ask you a question over here, and you roll a couple steps and bring up the answer. Okay, so anyway, you can roll your information, you can learn Spanish, you can learn, you know, algebra and all sorts of things using a teaching machine. So here we are bringing machines as tools to help us to learn, okay? So this has been going on, and we're talking about in the mid-60s, early 60s right there, okay? So that's when they came out. And I'm sure this is sitting in a dump somewhere right now, but the one that we had, or else it was plastic, so it'll probably be there for 1,000 years. But anyway, this was a valid teaching machine, and it really was helpful for people who are motivated to learn how to use it. So once again, the key word there is motivated to use it. You have to be motivated. Okay? Then these things came along, okay, a little bit later. So this would be the original, or one of the original IBM PCs. Okay, this is what we knew as a PC. It didn't have a hard drive. We had drive A and drive B. And the floppy disks that first came out were 8 inches. Okay, these were a real revolution at 5 1/4 inches. And then they came out with you can write on both sides. Then they came out with you can write on both sides with double density. So we used to buy floppy disk drives, 5 1/4 inches, double-sided, double density, for about $1 each. Okay, remember those days? So here we are, and then we have a Mac over here, one of the early Macs. And I think this thing in the middle looks like a watch. Okay, it has time, and it has the date on it, an alarm, and it has a wristband, but I can't figure out what this thing is on the bottom here. It looks just like a disk drive, but I don't remember any little tiny little disk drives or anything that came out. Does anybody know? Okay, but it's an interesting picture. Okay, but this is when you're able to actually sit down and run programs and run applications and things like that. And these were the early personal computers. Okay, take another little step down memory lane here. So now we're looking at personal computers and phones and tablets and laptops and more tablets and other phones. So we're kind of building up our repertoire of things that we have to use. So now we have the internet and we have the cloud. So what's the internet? The internet is a network of computers that talk to each other. That's the definition of the internet. We have a network of computers that talk to each other. Now, how they talk to each other is a PhD course that you'll have to take at the university, unless you want to listen to what I have to say, which is going to be a distilled version for you. Okay? And that's the one I'm going to be presenting to you, the distilled version for people who just want to have fun with computers and want to make them a tool to use in their lives. And we're going to make the course as much fun as we can along the way. Okay, so then we came up with this word, the Android smartphone. Okay, so back in the day, and there's probably somebody or more than one person in this room who still has a flip phone. Okay? The flip phone really wasn't a smartphone. A smartphone is basically a personal computer in a box, in a little box. But what else can this computer do? It can make phone calls because it has a special chip in it that can connect to cellular towers that over the air, okay, connect to cellular towers, and then they can be switched to actually connect to someone you want to talk to, or maybe someone you don't want to talk to. And if you have a cell phone these days, you probably get a lot of phone calls that you don't even want to have. So with good comes whatever else comes along with it. You know, people are inclined to take advantage of other people. But we have the smartphone. So a smartphone is basically a little computer that has phone capabilities as well. Is everybody following me so far? Am I going too fast? Okay. Moving right along. So we're going to be talking about things like how do you find out what you want to find out when using your computer, your tablet, your cell phone, without having to dig into how are the electrons moving through the copper wires and things like that. We're not going to go there because Tom doesn't want to go there.
No.
And he doesn't need to go there because that doesn't really relate to our lives and what we want to do. We want to have a device that works to do what we want to do, and we want to learn the things that we want to do, which might be different than what you want to do, which might be different than what you want to do. And I'm going to show you how to learn those things. Because the fantastic things about computers is that it's basically a reference library in a box, you know, is what it is. You can get information from any university in the world on these computers, any hospital, medical record. There's all sorts of things that can be done with these computers. So they can be a blessing, and then there's always the curse as well. They can be a real pain in the ass. Can I say that? Yeah, I can say that. They can be a real problem, but we're going to learn how to find the things that we want to do. We're going to learn certain skills, and of course we're not going to learn them all today. And if you really want to learn it, you have to practice. And if you really want to learn it, you have to teach it. So anyway, because if you think you know something, try to do it standing in front of a bunch of people. It's a whole different game. All right? So I believe that's how we're gonna the basic services we're gonna concentrate on in this session and moving forward. Email, how do you get your email? How many of you have more than one email account? How do you get more than one email account on your system? How do you do messaging? How do you text to somebody? How do you receive a text? How do you send a picture with a text? How do you take a picture and send that picture to somebody? Cool stuff. how do you use the internet for data, and how do you use your camera. And a lot of these have more than one camera. This one has a camera that faces toward me, it has one that faces away. What's a megapixel? We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Okay? So, from 2014 to 2020, we went from 1.57 to 2.87 billion smartphone users in the world. That's a lot of phones. That's a lot of resources to make these things. And not only make these things, but make them work. You know, so that's a lot of, I mean, it's not trillions, it's not quadrillions, it's not, you know, but that's a lot of phones out there. Okay, so, so we're going to be talking about phones and tablets and Chromebooks a little bit. Smart devices, a little bit. In the future, and we're not going to talk about these things at all except for this last one here, which is good today as well as far into the future. Using your head, it's a good idea. But there are biocomputers out there which interface directly with human tissues and things like that. And artificial intelligence is the new powerful thing, also one of the most scary things on the block right now. Robotics, which are doing a lot of the work for us in factories and changing our whole economic scene and the employment scene in this country and around the world. But still, using your head is really the most important part of the whole process, because it's between you and your device that's going to give you the power to do what you want to do. Now, out of experience, I want to say that the biggest problem that I found with people working with computers is that when they can't figure something out, they give up. Okay? So the trick to working with computers is not being smart. It's being persistent. Okay? And learning how to ask the right questions. So anyway, that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on how to look for what you want to know, how to try it out, how to take something similar that you've learned in the past and apply it to something new. And we're going to learn how to grow with our systems over time. Okay? The other thing we're going to do, we're going to talk about how not to blow up the battery in your phone. So we're going to talk about practical things as well. Because I think really the main thing we need to talk about is how to practically use these things for ourselves and to help other people. That should be this one here. Okay, so this next one, which was also on my download page, is a little story about computers. And you'll notice that we have these little blue words that are underlined. Those are hyperlinks. That means if you click on one of those, it will take you out to someplace like Wikipedia. So if you don't know what a Linux kernel is, if you go here, where did I find Linux? Let's see. That's not what I want to do with it. I can click on my kernel there, it'll take you out to Wikipedia and it'll tell you what Linux kernel is. Okay? And so here we have this article that's probably 15 pages long, you know, it just goes on and goes and goes and goes. And what I would like you to do is to read the first sentence. That will give you pretty much everything you need to know, okay? If you're a little more interested, read the first paragraph. If you're a PhD level thinker, read the whole thing and write a critique on it. Because some of the information in there is probably wrong, okay? And that's the purpose of Wikipedia, so people can look at it and they can correct errors and things like that. It's still not recognized to the point where you can use Wikipedia to reference things and use it in a doctoral thesis or term paper and things like that, you need to use something like Britannica or other reference sources that have a reputation for having complete information. But it's going to be good enough for us, and that's really what we're looking for right now. We're looking for stuff that's good enough. Okay, does that make sense? Can we live with that? Okay. So now that we're looking at that, we can take a look at this guy here, and we can see how Linux kind of got its name. Okay, from Linus Torvalds, and he's the guy who basically put this thing together. Okay. Now, what is Linux? The reason I'm getting into this is because almost all of the devices we're using these days have some connection to Unix. Okay? Unix is an operating system, and we can look up operating system in Wikipedia, but basically it's the instruction set that allows the computer to do the things that you want it to do. Okay, so the operating system is what allows you to actually see an interface, to see an icon, allows you as a human being to interact with the device, and hopefully it will do what you're trying to do. Otherwise it will do something else. So that's pretty much, it's a binary system. It does what you want, or it does something else. It's a problem we run into all the time. Someone have any questions or anything so far?
I've heard the term interface,
Mm-hmm.
and I've heard the term binary
Right.
so many times, and I don't have a specific.
Okay, so an interface would be like the screen.
That's
So this
true.
is a touch screen interface.
Okay,
Okay? This is a mouse that allows you to move around on a window interface. Okay? Binary basically means two.
mhm,
It comes from the new math that I learned when I was in first grade. Basically, it means you have two states, on and off. Okay? And it's a combination of those two states that allow you to come up with like the letter A. You know, when you're typing the letter A, basically you're using binary characters, but a whole bunch of them put together to make this letter A,
mm,
which is different than the binary characters that are used to make the number 1.
mhm.
But they're similar in a certain way, and we're not really going to get into that in this section. But binary basically means two, okay? And in the computer world, is all about information moves through it or it doesn't, okay? And so it's going to be either on or it's going to be off. And that's the reason why we use silicon, because silicon is a great way of putting up gateways that allow you to either pass through or to stop it, okay? And so that gives you two states. It gives you an on state and it gives you an off state. And what you can do with those two, the on and the off, is really what allows you to do anything on any one of these devices.
Okay.
Okay? Let's see if we can get back here. Okay, so anyway, so I'm just going to read through this and so we don't need to know everything, okay? Because the computer is going to help us to learn stuff, okay? We just need to know where to find the things we need to know, okay? So like Google or other search engines or how to bake a cake, you go to the Betty Crocker website, you know. So most of the women in here probably know, and the guys too, know Betty Crocker has something to do with cooking. So if you want to know how to cook something, you can go to Betty Crocker, probably find it there. You just need to know that, ask Betty Crocker, and go to www.bettycrocker.com, and you can find out how to make the butt cake. Okay? iOS is Apple's multi-touch mobile operating system. Okay? Now that has a couple of big words in it. Multi-touch means more than one touch. You can use 2 fingers, you can use 3 fingers, you can double press on something. And user interface, which basically means what you see when you look at the computer. This is my interface here. Okay? If I want to click on Linux kernel here, I go to my interface and I click on it. Does that make sense when I talk about interface? This is what's talking to me. This is what's connecting me to, well, actually to this thing right here. This little USB stick in there on the computer. Okay? Now, we're going to just go right down to here. Android is Google's mobile operating system. Okay, so we're talking about Android, Chromebook, not Android. Okay? But what are these all based on? These are all based on Linux. Okay? The Apple computers are based on Linux. The Microsoft computers are not, but they're moving in that direction, and pretty soon they will be. Okay, but all these phones, whether it's an Apple phone or an Android phone, they all have a Linux backbone to them. Okay, but Android sits on top of that Linux, and it's Google's mobile operating system based on Linux. It runs Play Store apps, so there's a little icon on your desktop that says Play Store on it, where you can go out and get Microsoft Word or Photoshop or something. Those are the apps and things like that. And all mobile phones have a SIM card so they can communicate over cellular networks. So a phone will have a SIM card, which is an identification card, so it can talk with the mobile cellular networks. And this tablet, which is not a cellular tablet, can connect over Wi-Fi networks, but not cellular networks. So this is a phone, and this isn't. Okay? But I can run the same apps on here that I can run on my phone. So they're both basically the same using the Android operating system, except using the cellular network, I cannot make phone calls on this thing. I can make phone calls using a wireless network. But let's not get too confusing. We're going to take a few breaks along the way, and because I don't want to overwhelm myself. I know you're getting everything I'm saying, but I don't want to overwhelm myself here. Okay, so all Wi-Fi capable tablets, they have internet capabilities. Some do have SIM cards in it. You can buy a cellular tablet, like at the Verizon store or something, and you can use a cellular network to connect to the internet. So you can use a cellular tower to connect. Most can be tethered to mobile hotspots, which will be Wi-Fi networks. So you can go down to the cafe that has a mobile hotspot. And things like the Chromebooks and Kindle Fire and things like that, although they're not typically called Android devices, they can run Play Store apps and things like that. Okay, so these are 5 my basic steps right here that everyone really needs if they want to move forward working with computers. Number 1, find a good teacher for you. A good teacher for you might not be a good teacher for you, which might not be a good teacher for you, or it may be. But anyway, you need someone to help you along, because this is like learning a foreign language, and you can learn it on your own if you're good, but it also helps to have someone who already speaks the language to move you forward. Ask a lot of good questions. They say there's no such thing as asking a stupid question. I don't know if I agree with that 100%, but some stupid questions are good at the same time. Okay, you have to practice, 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 and practice some more. Then apply and teach what you've learned. Okay? If at first you don't succeed, try again. Computers are more similar than they are different. When all else fails, RTFM. Read the fine manual. When frustrated, take a break. I can't tell you how many times myself, working in the industry and working myself at home, sometimes the best things I ever did to get a problem solved was turn off the computer, walk away for a day or two, maybe even a week, and then come back to it with a fresh thought, with a fresh head, and be able to resolve the issues. Sometimes just by walking away from the computer and letting it finish what it has started on its own will resolve the problems as well. Sometimes you just need to walk away. But it's just like getting back on a horse. You know, if you fall off a horse, you want to get back on the horse so you're not afraid to move forward. Same thing with computers. You're going to be challenged. You're going to come to a stopping point. But then eventually you need to start going again if you want to continue to learn with computers. We've all heard the term Google it. Google's a fine resource for learning. We can use the web, a wiki like Wikipedia, YouTube to see videos and things like that. For example, if we want to learn how to take a screenshot of a page, all we have to do in our Google browser is put in a phrase like, how do I take a screenshot with an HTC U11 smartphone? And you'll get an answer. You can actually look that up on Wikipedia and it will tell us how to do it. Now I doubt if anyone in here has an HTC U11 smartphone, but you might have an Samsung S7 or an S5 or something, and you can put that in there, or you may have an Acer tablet, and you can put that in there and it'll tell you how to do it. Okay? So, this is just a little example. If I put an HTC U11 screenshot into Google, I get these articles that tell me how to capture your phone screen and how to take a screenshot. 4 different ways of doing it. Most people just want to know one. Okay? But this article gives 4, and there's probably 100 different ways. Well, let's start with this plain article, look at 4, and then choose the one that you like. You know, and then try to remember it. I'll make a shortcut to it. So, for example, if you want to learn how to copy and paste, and you know you can do things like copy and paste on a smartphone. So if you're reading an article and you want to put something from a Google article into a letter or something, you can copy and paste it in there instead of typing the whole thing out. We're going to actually do that. That's going to be one of the things that we're going to do during the session. We're going to take screenshots and we're going to look at how do you actually connect to a Wi-Fi if you don't know how to do it already. How do you make free phone calls? Let's say you're going over, you have Verizon plan and it's a cellular plan and you're going over to Victoria and you're staying in a hotel. How do you make phone calls over the Wi-Fi network so it doesn't cost you anything? You don't have to pay the connection fees to connect over the cellular network. Well, we can do that with a Wi-Fi connection. So you can make calls and receive calls over Wi-Fi. So how do you email, how do you make messages, how do you open apps? You know, there's all kinds of things you can learn how to do on these devices. It's enough to make you crazy. How are we doing so far?
Great.
Okay. All right. So now let's get into the ugly page. Okay, so this page here is kind of the meat and potatoes of your devices. And there's no way we're going to get through all this today. So we're just going to take some little bits and pieces today and make it helpful and help you understand what you have with your phone. Like for example, your phone has an on-off button and it's a sleep button. Did you know that? It's all the same button. Yeah, it's all the same button. So on my phone right here, it hangs out the side. Looks like a little knob that hangs out the side there, and I press it, and the phone comes on. If I press it again, the phone goes blank. Now it's not turning off, but it's going into a low power sleep mode. Okay, I press it one more time, I turn it on, now it's on, it's using a lot of juice, I can get into my phone and access programs and things. And now I want to save my energy a little bit and not have it on, I just press the button one more time and it turns off. Okay, that's your on-off button and sleep mode. Now, if I want to turn off the phone, I have to hold the button in, and it gives me a little message. Do I want to power it off? Do it again. Do I want to power off, restart it, or go into emergency mode? Well, if I power it off, it basically turns the phone off. It doesn't use any juice. Okay, so it lasts a lot longer that way. In the good old days, when you go on an airplane, they used to tell you to turn your phone off, remember? That wasn't too long ago. There's probably a few airlines around the world that still do that. But what they found is that that really doesn't affect the electronics on the plane, so you can, these days, you can use your phone on an airplane, but they came up with something called airplane mode. Has everybody heard of airplane mode? So what does airplane mode do? Well, when you're on an airplane, they don't want you to interfere with their radios, their communications on the airplane. So they want you to turn off all the radios on your device. Now what the heck is a radio? That's what we used to listen to the baseball games on, right? Little transistor radio. Well, on a phone, the radios are things like your cellular connection, so you can connect to the cell towers, so you can talk back and forth with the cellular connection. It's for Wi-Fi, so when you're in a room like this and you can connect, you can't see it, but there's a Wi-Fi router back here, so you can connect to that and get to the internet over the Wi-Fi router. It turns that radio off. There's also a GPS, which is a radio in your phone. And it's any other device that's talking to somewhere else and it talks back to you, okay? So that's what airplane mode is. And if we're at Ely's during the day and everyone comes in there and turns on their phones and Steve's trying to talk and says, well, I'm getting a lousy connection because everybody's on their phone, well, how would you get them to turn that off? Well, put your devices in airplane mode if you've connected to the internet there, and that way you wouldn't be chopping up the signal at Ely's in the morning, and Steve can actually hear us talk back and forth and he wouldn't break up. So that's what airplane mode is used for, is to turn off some of the radio communications. And once again, there's multiple radios in your device. The radio, maybe the word radio probably isn't the best term to use, but it's a fairly accurate term. And the reason it's not the best term is because that's not what we're used to thinking of a radio as. We're used to thinking of going over to the Philco, you know, and turning it on and hearing that click, you know, and then you turn up the volume and someone talks to you, but you don't talk back to them. But anyway, we have some users in the group who use ham radios and things like that with two-way communications. Well, that's a radio too. That's ham. They call it ham radio. Yes.
So if you go into airplane mode, then you can't access the internet, you can't make any phone calls or anything. It basically shuts your phone down, doesn't it?
No, your phone is still on. You can still play checkers. You can still play solitaire. But you can't get to the internet because you're turning off all external communications between your device and the sources of connectivity, whether it be the internet over a cellular network.
Can you receive phone calls?
No.
No, it's okay, it's okay.
The radio's off.
Just whatever's in there you can play with, but you can't bring anything.
Right, but this is what's interesting as well, is that with this particular phone here, let's say I want to turn off my phone calls, but I want to connect to the Wi-Fi, but I don't want any other outside connectivity. I can put my phone into airplane mode, which will turn off my Wi-Fi and my cellular connection and any other radio signal that's coming in and out of my phone. But I can touch the little Wi-Fi icon and the Wi-Fi will turn back on. So all of the other radios will be off except for my Wi-Fi, and I'm not going to be connecting to any of these other networks except for the Wi-Fi network. So there's a lot of creative things. I use that a lot with troubleshooting, you know, when I'm trying to figure out what's working and what's not working. You can do that use airplane mode for other than its original intention. And that's really kind of the fun thing about these devices, whether it's a tablet or a computer or a Chromebook or a phone or whatever. It's coming up with new ways of using it that, you know, you wouldn't think are the normal ways of using it, but using it as a workaround to do something else you couldn't do in any other way. So it makes life interesting. Okay. So all of these phones have a home button. Okay. Now mine has a physical button on it, but I'm sure there's a phone in here that doesn't have a physical button on it, but it still has a home button. So does anybody have one of those phones that doesn't have a button on it, but you still got home? Yeah. So there's a software button. So when you swipe the screen, you get your button show up on the screen. Okay. That's only if you have a phone that doesn't have a physical button. Now here's the reason why that works. Because there are billions of Android phones out there made by all kinds of different manufacturers out there. And this is what makes teaching an Android class so difficult, because you can have 15 people in a room with 15 different types of Android phones. Okay? And they're all going to behave differently, and your interfaces are all going to look differently, and it's going to have different capabilities, because each manufacturer can take that Android operating system and customize it for their device. Now most of your Samsungs are going to work the same, okay? Although $1,000 Samsung is going to have more capabilities than a $200 Samsung phone, okay? But 99.9% of the people don't need those extra capabilities, okay? But for example, this phone, which is an S7, okay, a Galaxy S7, allows me to connect my phone to a wireless network, where some of the earlier models, earlier versions of the Android operating system didn't let you do it. And I get really crappy phone reception at home, but when I go through my Wi-Fi router, if my signal is weak, my phone calls both going out and coming in will use the Wi-Fi router to make and receive the phone call. So that is a real advantage for someone who needs that capability. And that might be one reason why you might want to buy a little more expensive phone than another if you need that capability. But you know, it just depends on what you need. If you live in the middle of Sequim or in Seattle or something, you're not going to have a weak signal, because there's enough cell towers around that it will be able to handle the load. Okay, so one of the things that I really like about Android phones that you won't find on an Apple phone, okay, it's like a go back button. So let's say and we're going to look at these more in detail later, but when you're like on a website and you want to go back, it's real easy to do on an Android phone, because there's a little button on your phone that will, if you're into your phone and it lights up, it can actually take you back one step. It can also, there's another place you can press on your phone that will show you all the open applications that you have. And these things are also available on Apple phones, except they work a little bit differently. Okay, so, but on the Android phone, I really like that feature, and I'd really miss it if I didn't have it. So I've just gotten used to it, and I really like that. We're going to be looking at that as we go through the phones. We're going to take a break in just a couple minutes. Did you have a question? So we're going to be looking at some of this stuff a little bit when we actually get into the phones a little more. But I really like that feature. You can also go to look at all your applications. You have another toggle switch that turns your volume up and down. Okay. You have a place for a headphone jack. And you have a microphone. And then we're talking about other audio options, which is you can use the speaker in the phone, or you can use something called Bluetooth. Now, who doesn't know what Bluetooth is? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I'll bet there's more than one person who really doesn't know what Bluetooth is, but we're not going to go there. I applaud you for being brave there. It's another networking, another source of networking that you have on your phone. It's another radio. Okay, so now we have radios. We have Bluetooth, we have Wi-Fi, we have cellular. I don't know if we really want to call it a GPS or radio, but it's at communicating with your position, like when you're allowing it to find your location. It can either do it using GPS satellites, or it can use the cellular towers around you to cross-triangulate and figure out where you are. But these are different ways that the strategies that the cell phone manufacturers have used to make these into real useful computers for people who understand how to use them and have practice, and then figured it out. And when they got frustrated, they just kind of walked away for a few minutes and came back, and eventually they were persistent enough until it became part of them. Okay? So that's what it takes to learn how to use these devices. Okay, so the next thing is the operating system and versions. Wish this
Did
didn't
you
come
tell
up
them
every
what
time.
Bluetooth was?
Hmm?
Did you tell
So
them?
Bluetooth is a short-range network, okay?
Well, it's what connects
So I have
this
this,
to my hearing aids.
exactly, I have this device, this speaker right here, okay? And I can, see if I can get into my phone here. And I can go to my, let me find a album here, and
Used primarily for listening to music.
so, I mean, you can go ahead and pass this around once.
Invisible speaker wire.
You had touched my heart.
I like it.
So, theoretically, Bluetooth is good for like up to 30 feet. There are advanced versions that actually reach farther than 30 feet.
And you put all the sweetness.
And I can control the volume and, let me get back to there.
Turn it off.
Turn it off.
But you notice there's a plus sign and a minus sign on the top there, and if you press plus, it makes it louder. But it's all coming from my phone.
Yeah, right.
So it's using the short-range Bluetooth network to actually make those connections. Go ahead and press the minus button on top there a couple times, and you'll notice that it gets softer. Oops.
Soft, turn it right on.
Go ahead, just.
But basically, Bluetooth, the way I understood it, is it connects.
Now you want to, when you press that middle button, that round button, it turns it off and on. That's what's happening here. There's a round button. But if you press the little plus sign, it makes it louder.
Bluetooth earphones.
Just taking my fun where it could be found.
Have some
Then
Bluetooth
yet
speakers
whatever
that
So when I go for a walk, I put on my Bluetooth headset. If it turns down a little bit. I put on my Bluetooth headset and I listen to music or listen to a podcast. And you can also get wireless ones that don't have a wire. Yeah. And you see these little people with these little blue lights going off and on all the time. Or you can make, if someone calls me and I'm wearing this, I can answer it using my Bluetooth headset. And this has a microphone in it, and it has turn off and on. You have your hearing aids attached to it. People have pacemakers attached to it. It's a way of communicating in short distances with a network.
Right.
But if you go beyond 30 feet, you lose the connection.
Cut that way.
Whereas Wi-Fi gives you a stronger signal, and you can often go even 100 feet or more with Wi-Fi. Or with wires, you can go
Well,
hundreds, you can go miles. If you use fiber optic, you can go hundreds of miles. So you have all these different connectivity options. Okay?
But you have your cell phone on, plus that.
Yes. Well, if I turn this off, I can use the speaker in the phone and listen to the music too. But it doesn't sound as good because this speaker is much smaller and doesn't have the. It's used for making a speakerphone call. You know, if you don't want to put this next to your ear, you can hear the speaker this way. But it's not going to give you the quality of sound because someone who works with sound knows that in order to have good speakers, you have to have good magnets. And you can't. There's just not enough room in here to put in really good magnets. Whereas this is kind of like a smaller size where you can get bigger magnets and things like that.
What's your sound quality here?
It's pretty good. And you can, let's put it this way, it's as good as money can buy. So if you're willing to spend a lot of money, you can get high fidelity sound. But it's always going to be digital. Okay, it's not analog. Do you understand what I mean when I talk about analog compared to digital? Let's talk about that just a second. Everything here is a digital device. This is digital. This computer here works as a digital device here. When you listen to music on these, you're listening to digital sounds. They use something called sampling, where they break up the sound into chop it in little pieces, and then they send that sound as little tiny bits along the electronic wire, and it picks up on your device, and your device uses something called a codec, and you may have heard of a codec. A codec is it codes and decodes. So code is code, deck is decode. Okay, codec. And basically it allows the signal, the digital sound, to move from one device like to a speaker in tiny little pieces. Now, the analog sound is what you would have heard out of a 33 1/3 long play record. Remember those? These days, those records are really valuable because they don't break it up into little pieces. Every tiny little sound comes out when that needle scratches that groove. It comes out over the speakers. So if you're an audiophile, if you're someone who loves audio and things like that, analog sound is the cat's meow for you because you're going to get every little bit and piece along the way. So real audiophiles, you're still going out and buying those 33 1/3 records, and that's why they've gotten so expensive for the classic ones, is because you get everything. Something you listen to over an MP3 player, that's all digital. It's not nearly the quality, okay? But you can get really good quality sounds where someone like you and I can't tell the difference. We're not audiophiles, we just like music. Okay? But the more bits and pieces you get along the way, guess what? Your files get bigger and bigger. So our ears they're not really that great, you know? They work good, you can hear sounds and things like that, but there's a lot of stuff that we miss. So like when you talk over the telephone to somebody, you're only getting part of what they're saying. Okay, but you're getting enough to understand what they're saying, okay? And the better the sound is, it means the better the pipeline you have to have from one end to the other. So they're always trying to improve the sound without using a whole much more information. Each one of those little bits and pieces is just digital information that's being sent over a wire or over the air. But it doesn't have the quality that you'd get in an analog signal. So the bottom line is, for most of us, this is good enough, okay? And enough said, okay? We don't need to get deeper into that, because that could be a whole other rabbit trail along the way. Why don't we just take a couple-minute break here and just kind of let things settle in. Use the restroom if you need to. You can use either restroom because there's no class. Okay, we can talk about music and just let's talk about music when we come back in just 5 minutes. Okay.
I noticed that when I put on earphones on TV,
Right.
when I put them on, sometimes I will hear a doorbell in the background that I didn't hear before. Or
Right.
someone talking more in the background
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't catch.
Oh,
when I
that
was
was
watching it the first time.